We start with the tax relief in this budget that's in both the personal income tax cuts and also in the form of the property tax relief that we're putting into this budget. The top tax bracket is going to be reduced in year one, down from 3.5% to 3.18%. And then in year two, we will finally be at a flat income tax here in the state of Ohio, something that we've felt is important for some time, something that we have felt we've been striving for at this point over a decade, something that years ago we would routinely miss out on businesses and more economic growth and expansion in the state because people would look at us and say, your tax burden here in the state of Ohio is too much. We don't hear that nearly as much. We're going to continue down the path and finally get to a flat income tax here in the state of Ohio. Additionally, when talking about property taxes are something that, as I've said before, has become a kitchen table issue here in the state of Ohio. It's something where Ohioans have seen the system play out the way that it has. Ohioans have seen that system result in some unanticipated spikes in their property taxes, and I think it's something that the people of Ohio expect us to address here in this budget. Primarily, the way that we have set up property taxes over the course of time, we've gotten so far away from the way that they were originally intended to work, and that they were originally intended to have much more of an anti-inflationary element to them, and they've become something that are extremely inflationary in many cases where school districts are not only getting an inflationary bump from being at the 20 mil floor artificially, but also getting an inflationary bump for millage above the 20 mil floor that's resulting in a spike in property taxes across the state. We're addressing that in a variety of ways and trying to get back to what our property tax system was originally supposed to be, while also expanding the homestead exemption for the people of the state of Ohio in an effort to offer relief to those who may need it the most. Education funding that we've put into this budget. We have invested more in this budget than any other budget before in public education. There will be a record amount of investment in public education in this budget, an additional $633 million relative to the last biennium. And one element that we've added into this budget as well is the implementation of a performance supplement, if you will. We heard from our caucus that they wanted to see a little bit more of a performance emphasis in the budget to ensure that all the extra money that we put into the formula is being spent wisely. As you know, we've increased funding by about $1 billion in each of the last two bienniums, and we're adding another $633 million in this version of the budget into the formula in an effort to offer the resources we can to public education. There will be, like I said, the performance premium that will be offered to districts that show a 4-star or above on the overall performance grade card, and also districts that show a 3-star above on the overall progress section of the grade card, to ensure that it's not just districts that are high performing, but it's also districts that are showing improvement, that are going to see the benefits of this formula. Additionally, we've continued with the implementation of the Fair School Funding Plan. That was something that many of our members of our caucus felt was important. They felt it was a deal that was entered into years ago, and that we owed it to the communities out there to continue the implementation of that. Additionally, there is the discussion that's been ongoing about the cap on the carryover balances for each of these school districts. That is going to be changing in this budget relative to what the House had passed. The House originally passed in their budget a 30% cap on the carryover balance in the general fund. We are changing that to a 50% cap on the carryover balance. However, there is going to be an ability for school districts to, over and above and beyond that 50% cap, put money into a capital fund that they can use for maintenance of their buildings, they can use for debt service, they can use for a variety of things that they're already currently using that for. We've heard from a lot of school districts across the state and in each of our districts about the importance of them being able to have that flexibility, and I do believe that this accommodates for that while also setting reasonable expectations under the circumstances as people across Ohio expect us to address some of the property tax issues that are going on right now. In addition to that, we've invested significant resources in addressing our housing crisis in this budget. not only in some of the tax credits that are being approved for further investment in housing across the state of Ohio, but also through the launch of 2 new programs. Senator Reynolds has worked on each of these programs. One is the Residential Economic Development Districts, which is aimed at going to areas where there is an awful lot of anticipated housing growth, particularly areas around major economic development projects, and incentivizing local governments around those areas to streamline their zoning codes, to put zoning codes in place in some cases that will allow for these housing projects to move forward more efficiently. There is $10 million for that program. And in addition, what we're seeing in many rural parts of the state are areas where it is simply uneconomical for home developers to come in and build in many of our rural communities, in many reasons because of the fact that the cost of infrastructure is so onerous in those areas that the amount of homes they would need to build just to break even is simply way more than that local market can absorb. All the while, our local communities have seen very little housing development over the course of the last 10 years. There will be created a $90 million revolving loan fund that will be used to help fund that effort as well. We also have made significant investment in sports and cultural facilities in this budget. This is something that obviously many of you have asked about what we are doing. Here's our plan as to what we're doing, and Jerry can explain it in much greater detail than I can, but I would say that we are assured in large part that the money that we invest in this project will be paid back. We are going to get our money back. It is something that is going to actually be a net revenue gain for the state of Ohio over the course of the life of the asset, and it's something that I think also sets a good parameter for potential future projects to ensure that we are getting the best possible return on behalf of the residents of the state of Ohio. So in order to get here, it took a number of tough decisions to get to where we are, and it took some decisions on our part to contain spending to get to the point where we are today. Some of that was through the elimination of a variety of earmarks in our budget to make sure that we are trying to be resourceful with some of the money that the taxpayers have entrusted us with. Some of it was also through containing the exponential growth of Medicaid spending. Medicaid spending has been something that has grown exponentially. You can see the graph up there right now as to how the all funds meaning state and federal dollars, how that has grown over the course of even the recent times in the legislature. And then, of course, in the state funds, in the state share of that spending, you can see how fast that has grown, well beyond the rate of inflation in the recent years. That's something that if we don't address it now, and if we don't try to get our hands around controlling the growth of Medicaid spending, it is only going to continue to grow uncontrollably. And then, of course, we've taken a strategic look at many of our tax expenditures, AKA the tax deductions, the tax credits, the various other tax treatments that we offer that's preferential to some groups at the expense of others. And we've asked ourselves, which ones are we actually getting an economic growth element out of? Which ones are we actually getting the juice that's worth the squeeze out of offering those? And in that case, we've eliminated a number of tax expenditures in a way to bring more revenue into the state. So that concludes my introductory comments. I'll hand it over to Chairman Serino, who I think has done a fabulous job to this point managing this process, as have many of our staff members and also many of our other members of the Finance Committee. I'll turn it over to him, and we'll take some questions after he is finished. Thank you.
Thank you, President McCauley. President McCauley did a great job of outlining a number of the key areas, and I just want to add a little commentary to that as well. As I think all of you know, because I think every single person in this room right now is also in the hearing room, practicing the art of speed reading after we passed out the summary of the bill. The bill was 5,565 pages, and the summaries you have in front of you attempt to cover most of the items that are particularly relevant as we look at this budget. And I think it's a very exciting and very bold budget. It displays the Senate's interest in promoting economic growth, putting dollars back in the hands of taxpayers through our tax cut, supporting education at all levels, taking care of the vulnerable, reducing unsustainable growth in Medicaid costs, as we've just described, and lowering property taxes and increasing transparency of school financing, which has a direct correlation to the property tax issue, property evaluations and property tax issues. So getting to a flat tax over the next 2 years of this of the new biennium is really an important milestone. The income tax in Ohio was established in 1972. So we haven't always had an income tax in Ohio. But it's time now, and it's been a long process for the legislature to slowly but surely begin to reduce those, reduce the brackets, reduce the rates. And we believed it was time now, and under President McCauley's leadership, as a prime objective of this budget, getting to a flat tax is the right place to be for the people of Ohio. And we're joining 14 other states that have a flat tax. Continuing the final 2 years of the phase-in of the Fair School Funding Plan is a part of our budget. We've added more dollars in funding than current law, than the House proposed budget, or the executive proposed budget, $634 million. We're going to let the formula actually work and continue in its final phase, so there are districts that will get less than they did in '25, but no one will get less than what they received in fiscal '21, as the Fair School Funding Plan was designed to do. The data for the base cost has not been updated for the final 2 years. However, as President McCauley mentioned, a new component has been added to recognize performance of the districts who have showed great progress or received a 4 or 5 star rating in their last evaluation here. We've been talking a lot about performance and accountability. We believed clearly that this was a necessary addition to the funding formula as we move forward, and as we expect more and more out of our school districts. In higher education, an area I've spent a lot of time in the last 4 years, the Senate continues to be passionate about all post-secondary educational opportunities. These are programs, whether it's a technical school, or it's a community college, or a 4-year university. They are critical to us providing the in-demand workforce that our companies around the state of Ohio need. And we also owe it to our students to have the best possible post-secondary opportunities that we can deliver to them. In the SSI area, the state share of instruction area, we are coming in this budget at 1% over the prior period, which is more than the executive allowed. And we've allowed for permissive allowances for some small tuition and fee increases by both our universities and our community colleges. We've also made some alterations to the Governor's Merit Scholarship Program. Beginning in year 26, it will be the top 2% who will qualify in their classes with a minimum of one person, which takes into account some very small districts that we do have around the country in our 611 school districts. And we also have the proviso that after graduation, with the exception of graduate school, which would toll during that time, that you have to remain in Ohio after graduation for 3 years. Property taxes, again, we've heard the cries of people concerned about valuations and property taxes. It's a complicated problem, largely caused by inflation and spending that we saw in the last administration in Washington. We are taking steps to reduce this trauma that higher valuations are causing. So in terms of school property taxes, and the more people I talk to around my district don't realize that 70% plus of their property taxes are levied on them by their school systems, okay? So what we've included in this bill are levels of transparency. We are eliminating certain types of levies, as you can read in the summary. We have addressed as the President mentioned, the carryovers, 50%. We had over $10 billion of carryovers last year by our school systems. That's a lot of money. We are going to make allowances at 50% carryover cap. We're making allowances for for capital projects that they have to do within 3 years of the time it is looked at, to make sure that we make allowances for school systems that have been doing a good job of saving money for capital projects that they have in their plans. And we've also authorized the budget commissioners to give back excess taxes as they determine. And we've also supported leaving the prosecutors in the budget commission scheme of things. It was suggested in the House, I believe, that county commissioners would be taking their place. We have a different view of that. Economic development and housing, as the President mentioned, $9 million for residential economic development districts, a grant program that Senator Reynolds was instrumental in putting together, and then $90 million for residential development in the revolving loan program. We are restoring the Ohio Housing Trust Fund, and those funds will be administered through a centralized, on a centralized basis, and will not be going back to the House in our version of the budget. Economic development is critical to the state of Ohio. We can't provide the services for those who are in need and our educational requirements in Ohio if we don't have a strong and vibrant and growing economy. Amongst the other things that we're doing, we're continuing to put lots of money into TMUD, which is transformational mixed-use development programs that are tax credits that are used by our developers. Opportunity zone tax credits, we're taking that from 25 to 50 million. Brownfield remediation, which is critical to the development process. We're going to make sure that every county in Ohio gets a minimum of $1 million in brownfield remediation dollars, and then others will be determined on the basis of the process that we have in place through the Department of Development. We're also going to continue with the film production credits and the historic tax credits that have been used quite a bit, particularly in our major cities here. Our budget maintains funding for most critical services on the Medicaid side of things, while safeguarding our state's finances. The responsible choices made in this budget will position us to effectively manage our programs and give us the ability to adjust the changes that may occur when we get changes put on us by the federal government. A lot of that has been talked about. We don't know what the feds are going to do at this point, but we want to be in as good a position as we could be in when some of those decisions come our way. We are supporting food banks, medical assistance to children, early childhood education, publicly funded childcare, and many other programs to support those that are in need. Now, I'd like to kind of wrap up by talking a little bit more in detail about the Browns project. I have gotten 1 or 2 phone calls from many of you about this, and so I'm going to carefully go through this with you, okay? So there have been many objections to the issue of supporting, whether or not to support a new stadium for the Browns. So number of those objections have been, well, a bond approach has lots of debt service. In fact, it would be around $400 million of debt service for $600 million over 25 years. On top of that, lots of legal costs in the millions when you do a bond offering like that. We have other people have said, well, that risks the state's credit rating in case something were to go wrong with the project. We have a AAA rating in Ohio. We've worked very hard to get there, and we don't want to certainly put that in jeopardy. And it also, we had concerns, people had concerns about the effect on GRF, where the interest payments would be coming from. So we've been working with the Browns people for a couple of months now on we think, a rather unique approach to doing this, so that we don't have to use GRF and we don't have to go into debt and pay $400 million of debt service. What we've developed is a plan called a performance grant that and I'll talk about the source of the funds in a second, but it's going to be cash, a grant for a program that will last 16 years. And for each of those 16 years, we outline the incremental taxes that the new stadium and mixed-use development associated with that will provide to the state through income taxes, sales tax, and CAT. And we have a schedule for each of those 16 years. It's a little lower in the beginning because there's obviously not going to be playing games until they get it built. And so we've made some adjustments there. And for each of those, in every 4-year period, we're going to have a true-up, which will basically look at the actual incremental taxes that the project contributes versus the forecast. And if there are any shortfalls in meeting the forecast number, because the actuals fell short, the Browns are putting in a $50 million fund into escrow that will serve to backfill any shortages in the true-up periods, the 4 true-up periods that we will have. Now, should the shortfall, should the $50 million be used early, the Browns have committed to another $50 million through a predetermined line of credit that will give us a total of $100 million of surety that they're going to meet their targets, or those dollars get put back into the number here. We have also included in the $600 million on top of that an inflator of 3.5%, which is appropriate for inflation and other things. So at the end of the 16-year period or earlier, if the incremental tax revenues come in faster and larger than we had anticipated, the arrangement will be over, okay? If there's anything left in their escrow accounts, it gets returned to them. But after the project is completed in 16 years, the continued taxes from the incremental taxes will continue to come into the general fund. And it's the estimate right now for the life of the stadium is 30 to 50 years. And if they make a lot of changes in the interim time, it could extend that life significantly. So we believe this is a good plan. It doesn't put the credit rating of the state in jeopardy. And now I'll tell you where the money's going to come from. You're probably wondering about that. So right now we have in unclaimed funds in the state of Ohio $3.7 billion sitting idly waiting to be claimed. Much of that money has been there for a very, very long time. What we're proposing in our bill is to take $1.7 billion of that and putting it into a special fund for stadium and culture improvements. We're going to appropriate $600 million of that 1.7 to the Browns project in the manner I just described to you in the arrangement with the Browns. And then we're going to take the 1.1 billion left and put that into our fund for future projects that have not yet been appropriated. Many of them haven't even been identified. But one of the criticisms early on of this project was that, well, how are you going to take care of everybody else? Well, we know there are going to be other projects coming down the road, and we want to be able to have funds set aside in order to take care of that. So they have not been identified yet. The parameters of those projects will be evaluated on a one-by-one basis, but we wanted to set aside the funds to be able to support those for sure. We will also, through something called the escheatment process, be taking the funds from the Department of Commerce where the unclaimed funds are sitting right now. And so we will take that 1.7, escheat it into this special fund that we are setting up. And then about $100 million a year gets added new into the unclaimed funds. So that cycle will continue. And if something is there for 10 years, it will then be escheated back into our special fund. At no point are we risking the ability of the state to make good on any obligations that it might have for folks or organizations that are claiming or have claims for the unclaimed funds. And with the addition coming in every year, we'll be able to support other projects going forward in the state. What this does is it takes idle money and puts it to work to create jobs, to create incremental taxes, and that's why we're so excited about this project. There There are and will be detractors of this approach probably, but this is about economic development, not just supporting a sports team. It's really an economic development project that happens to involve a sports team and a stadium, but also other mixed-use development as well. We're very confident this is going to work. We're very confident we're not putting any of the state's assets or credit ratings at risk. And we feel it's a very creative way to do this and to use money that is not working for us right now and putting it to work to create jobs and good economic growth in Northeast Ohio. That's all I have on the Browns project, and anything else, I guess we'll take questions at this point.
Raise your hand, and I'll call on you. I know you're getting up against your deadline, so we'll try to expedite. Jim Province.
Can you tell us what the budget does with H2 Ohio in comparison to what the
Sure.
governor proposed in the House?
Sure, thank you. Thanks for the question. We are concurring with the House on the budget for H2 Ohio. However, you will see in the summary that we have mixed up the numbers a little bit. So there's ODNR, there's EPA, and agriculture who were involved in H2 Ohio. We are convinced after some further study and discussions with all three of them that the agriculture department is really, we don't want to reduce them very much at all. They're doing really great work in trying to address the phosphorus emissions coming from, particularly in the Maumee Valley and other parts of the state as well. So we're giving, and we have the numbers in the summary, we're giving agriculture, we're keeping them from much of a loss in total, but in the total numbers, we are going with the House numbers.
So it's still a $120 million cap?
Correct. Correct.
How many districts of the state 600 some school districts will the 50% carry over? How do you land on that number, or what would affect?
I think the printouts that have all of the district numbers are going to be made available to you if they have not.
They should be on
been
the Senate's
already.
website.
So I believe there were, is this for the carryover amount?
Oh, this is the increase.
Okay,
This is
that's for the
increase.
school funding. I believe the printout you guys will have access to. It should be a sheet that looks similar to this. Should be available for you on the websites, or it will be here shortly. The way we ended up at that number is, as you might imagine, we've been talking an awful lot with superintendents across the state. 30%, we all pretty much uniformly felt was too low of a number because it didn't allow for much of the unanticipated, unexpected expenses that a school district might see in the form of, hey, your boiler just went out, or you need to replace a roof on a building all of a sudden after it sprung a leak, or whatever the case may be. So they needed a little bit more flexibility in that regard. But we also felt that there were a number of districts out there, and this is where the kind of the spillover into the capital fund is important. We felt there were a number of districts out there that were doing a very good job, who might have been sitting at an 80% carryover, an 85% carryover, but they were saying, we haven't gone to the voters for an increase in millage in 12 years, 15 years sometimes, and we're using our existing operating revenue to pay for our debt service, to pay for our building maintenance, to do all these things that we could have gone to the voters for additional millage for, but we decided not to under the circumstances. That's why we're allowing for the spillover, which will effectively allow them to go much higher than 50%, provided that they're spending that money on capital expenditures.
Does the spillover effectively not create property tax relief through the system then? It kind of is a moot point then?
It will in a variety of districts. So the spillover will create property tax relief, maybe not in the immediate near term like the House had intended with their 30% cap on carryover. But it's going to require the school districts to spend those capital dollars within 3 years of depositing them into the capital account, which will require them to actually have an intended use in all likelihood to be able to use that money. What we're seeing in some cases is districts that are carrying over 100% in some cases, and then placing additional millage in some cases on the ballot going forward. And that's something that's not the way this is supposed to work. I don't think reasonable people would argue that that's the way that it's supposed to work. We have districts that are sitting at over 100% carryover, that are sitting on emergency levies that they've had in place for, in some cases, almost 40 years, and they have 100% carryover in their accounts. That's the type of stuff we're trying to change. So here's some numbers that were just handed to me. There were 485 districts in the state. There are approximately 600 school districts in the state. There were 485 districts in the state that were over 30% of the carryover amount. There are 292 districts in the state that are over 50%. But as I mentioned before, those districts would, if this ends up in law, have the opportunity to place those dollars into their capital accounts to be able to use on capital expenditures going forward.
With this 633 over the biennium in the school foundation money, how much of that is like traditional K-12? How much of that is like charter schools, and then vouchers? Do you guys do a non-charter, non-public savings account program? Yeah.
Yeah, we did not do the savings program. That is not in the bill. And we can get details for you on how that 635 is going to be spread, okay? But it's generally been put into the formula, and largely it's going to be applied to the performance additions that we've added to the criteria. I should mention too, I forgot to mention the Homestead exemption. We're putting another $50 million to expand eligibility over the biennium for Homestead exemption, to try to give some property tax relief to those who are in most need of it as well.
Is this 1% and 1.5% reduction the primary way you guys are trimming Medicaid, or are there other efficiencies in that?
There were a few programs that we made some programmatic trimmings to that may have already been in statute. Those will reveal themselves when you look at the documents. But what we've seen, and obviously you can see it in the graph that's put up on the screen, is an alarming trend of more and more state dollars going into Medicaid. This was not us in any way saying that, the recipients of Medicaid, don't deserve to receive it or anything like that, or that these programs are not, worthy. But what it is an acknowledgement that Medicaid has become, in effect, a Pac-Man of the state budget, in that it is growing exponentially, largely without any sort of restrictions around it. And as a result of that, it puts an awful lot of pressure on school funding, on a variety of other programs that we want to put into place that we also think are important. And so it was largely meant as a way to kind of put a stop to the state increase in spending that's been happening at Medicaid, acknowledging that most of the Medicaid spending is not done through specific appropriations or formulas that are in Medicaid, but rather it's done administratively through the department, and trusting that the department will be able to look at the amount of spending increases they've had and look at the totality of their budget from state dollars and be able to find efficiencies to absorb those cuts.
Yeah, on Medicaid, I'm looking at the comp doc here, and it looks like the Group 8 eligibility redetermination every 6 months is going to increase disenrollment and potentially increase administrative costs. For one, do you know what the disenrollment number might be? And two, it's just a lot of reporting, like every 6 months, putting income verification and whatnot into Medicaid.
I don't believe it's a lot of reporting. Frankly, when we look at the Medicaid, so the Group 8 population, so for everybody's aware, that's the Medicaid expansion population. These are adults with no dependents who are able-bodied. And that was something that we looked at, and we looked at much of our business community as well, who are saying we're having a hard time finding people who will come back to work. We're having a hard time finding people who are willing to accept the positions that are open, but also looking at the amount of money that we're spending on Medicaid. And over the course of a year, especially in a competitive job market like we've seen over the course of the last several years, over the course of a 12-month period, you can have an awful lot of changes in somebody's economic circumstances that would justify them being removed from Medicaid or any other government program. And so I don't think 6 months is too frequent. I think it's an appropriate number.
Do you know the disenrollment number?
I don't know the disenrollment number offhand.
Oregon?
But inherently, if they're being disenrolled, they're no longer eligible for Medicaid.
Yeah, the comp doc
says that for operating expenses for K through 12, there is no change from the House version to the Senate version, even though you did add the 100 million for K through 12 schools. What would you say to the schools that say that you're not actually doing the Fair School Funding Plan and that this is going to devastate them?
This is not going to devastate them. So if you go and you look at all sources of funding for each of these public school districts, when you look at the Fair School Funding Plan, one of the things that is a big element of the funding formula is the local capacity element. Naturally, as you've seen property valuations rise, the local capacity element rises with the formula as well. And so you're going to see some districts that may see a decrease as a result of that. You're also going to see some districts that may see a decrease because their enrollment has decreased over the last 5 years since 2021 when this program was implemented. And so really what it comes down to is as we are having conversations with the education community, as we are having conversations with our own membership, there's a common refrain of let's implement the formula. This is the formula that we had agreed to. Let's continue to implement it. That's what we've done here. Now, one thing that you will see is there's 107 million roughly each year that's put into these performance criteria that we are referencing that is baked into the formula as well. So I would say as we compare it though, and we did the analysis on this, as we compare the negative numbers in the districts who may have received a cut from the previous biennium as a result of their formula output, as we compare that to their total budget from all sources that we've received, you'd be hard-pressed to find a district that received over a 2% cut in all of their revenues. And that's not going to devastate, quote-unquote, a school district.
If I could just add to that, John. So again, when you get the spreadsheets, which is, will list all 611 school districts, it's a wide spreadsheet with lots of numbers on it, but as President was mentioning, go look at whether, if there was a negative number, if it's a cut in 26 and 27 versus 24 and 25, look at the amount of the reduction that the system is facing and compare that as a percentage of its total operating dollars. That's what the President was referring to, and that you'll find that very interesting, that the percentages are actually quite low.
Kristen?
Can you talk about what you did in childcare?
In childcare, sure. So we did not restore the childcare tax credit that was in the executive. And we left alone the publicly funded childcare. We left it where it is today.
Nick?
You guys have not, I guess you have gotten rid of the Ohio Elections Commission, but you replaced it with something else.
Correct.
Why are you doing that in the budget? Why not do that through a bill? Even if you think it's a great idea, why do the budget?
Well, I guess the budget has a lot of policy in it too, and so we just felt that when we try to make these decisions as to what should be in the budget and what should be a standalone bill, that those are somewhat subjective decisions that we make. We just felt at this time that it was a good idea to put it in the bill instead of running a standalone bill.
I would also say, as an addition to that, anytime you are rearranging agencies, there's corresponding budgetary impacts to that. And so if we are removing the Ohio Elections Commission and their corresponding budget impact and inherently trying to account for that in another agency, that's also what would make it appropriate for the budget.
No.
I haven't heard you say anything about iGaming or any gambling expansion. What does that say about where your caucus stands? Is that an indication you're not for it, or you just haven't hashed it out? You don't know where to spend the money?
iGaming is not in this bill. No expansion of gambling is in this bill. It remains to be seen whether it will be put in the budget at all. We would rather take the time to get this right if we are going to do it at all. It's obviously a big policy shift. We don't need it to balance our budget as it currently states, or currently stands rather. And so I wouldn't view it as an indication one way or the other than we need more time, and certainly the caucus needs a chance to weigh in more on it.
Senator Serino, good to talk to you in person, sir. The idea of using unclaimed funds for the Browns project, you're going to have people are against this is saying, that's not your money to touch. That's my Grandpa Joe's old bank account that we didn't know was there. How do you respond to that? And have you had any discussion with the House side on this brand new idea?
Well, let me answer your last question first. No, we have not. We generate our bill on our own. The House did the same thing, and so did the governor. We'll obviously be talking about it as we get to conference after we pass our omnibus bill. But look, we were very careful to make sure that we're not running into any jeopardy of being able to support unclaimed funds that are actually legitimate and someone actually claims it. The percentages are very, very low. And I might add that since we have the timeline of 10 years before we can access those funds, after it's been in the state's possession, very often those funds sit in insurance companies or banks or other places. They sit there for years while they try to find who the rightful owners are or heirs if it's an estate situation. So by the time the state gets it, it's already 5 to 10 or even longer years, and then it sits in a state for 10 years before it would be escheated to this special fund that we've set up. So we don't think there's really any risk of jeopardizing that. Plus, we're putting in $1 million a year in the budget for the Commerce Department to be able to do even more to try to connect claimants with the funds that are out there and that are unclaimed at this point.
Yeah, could I add a little bit on that? So in addition, there's the 10-year claim period. So even if the money were to be taken out, this year, that money, those potential claimants would have up to 10 years to make a claim against the unclaimed fund that was taken out. After that 10-year period, it would transition to an annual removal from the funds of anything that was 10 years old at that point. All of the funds that we would be taking out, $1.7 billion, are 10 years old or older. In fact, just if you look at the $600 million amount, I believe all of those are at least 18 years or older. So they've been sitting in the funds for some time. But as I mentioned, we are creating a process that would allow for claimants to come in and get their money for the next 10 years. And then, of course, they'd have up to 10 years after that 10-year period were to expire. A little bit on escheatment generally, probably not a term that many people have heard unless you cover court proceedings. So escheatment is not a new concept. We've had escheatment on the books in the state of Ohio for some time, and primarily it's aimed at if you cannot find the owner of abandoned property or resources, it's a process by which the state would take those resources. If you go and you look in the probate setting, for example, if there is somebody who dies intestate, which means they die without a will, you can't find their heirs, there is no heir, there's no family member that you can point to that says that these are the people who are supposed to receive the resources. There's already an escheatment process in place whereby the state would then become the owner of that property. This is expanding upon that a little bit. There are other states that have similar processes already in place, and escheatment generally is something that's been around in law dating back all the way to Old English law. So this is not a new concept.
So that money goes away after the 10 years, and then they have 10 years to make, after 20 years, that money's gone.
So of the $1.7 billion that's being transferred over, it has been, all of it, every single dollar of that has been in unclaimed funds already for 10 years. All of that $1.7 billion until 2036, somebody can still come and make a claim on any of that money if they're the rightful owner of that money. And that's also something that, as Jerry mentioned, we're putting money into Commerce to be able to try and connect the rightful owners of unclaimed funds as we move forward. After 36, it would, the escheatment to the state would finish at that point. Yeah.
Governor DeWine and Speaker Huffman have both said that they're not hearing from Ohioans that income tax cuts need to happen right now. This would result in significant revenue loss for the state, obviously. So why do you guys feel like the time is now? And can you outline where that revenue loss is going? It looks like it's going to be split between the local government fund and library fund, if I'm correct.
Well, not the library fund, because the library fund is, in our version, is no longer indexed We went along with the House. It's no longer going to be indexed to the general revenue fund. And so it's not coming out of the library fund. Local government fund, for every other tax cut we have ever done, has always had been impacted by any tax cuts that we've done. However, I would point out that as we have done tax cuts in the past, it has not had an adverse impact on the whole on our revenue. LSC, the Legislative Budget Office, and also OBM don't really, when they model these revenues, they don't factor in the dynamic potential of some of the tax changes that we've made. I think it's undeniable right now when you look at the amount of economic development gains and wins that we're getting, that the tax environment that we've created in the state of Ohio from a lower tax burden has had a positive economic development. It's brought more jobs to the state. It's brought more investment to the state. This is something that can be proved across the country, in fact, where you've seen instances where states who have a flat income tax or no income tax are seeing much more economic growth than the state of Ohio and some other states are. And it's not just warm weather states. It's states across the country that are not necessarily in warm weather climates that are seeing that as well.
I wanted to just add, I neglected to mention, we have, this will be good news for host communities of recreational marijuana, that taxes, since it became legal in Ohio, we've accumulated a lot of tax dollars that have not been distributed. And we're still working through a likely separate legislation to deal with that between the House and the Senate. But we are, in this bill, we are going to be distributing $20 million to host communities who have not been getting their share of the taxes that was originally set up. That may change in the future when the bill actually passes and gets agreed to first and then passes. But it'll be good news, a good insertion of funds for our communities who decided to allow these operations in their cities or townships in trade for the taxes that they would be getting. They haven't been getting them, and we're going to make sure that in this bill that they get that $20 million.
We'll go with Anna, Shane, and Avery. Anna, go ahead.
So the elimination of the top income tax bracket affects, I think, right around 20% of Ohioans, right? So about 20% of Ohioans pay that top bracket. So that means 80% of Ohioans won't see an income tax cut. So what's sort of your message to folks who are like, where's my cut?
Well, there's a good chunk of Ohioans who are below the $26,050 threshold who don't pay any income taxes right now. What we have also done in this bill that we did not discuss is we're kind of buying down that fiscal cliff as well. And so the way that the tax code is set up right now, if you make $26,050 or less, you pay no income taxes. If you make $26,051, you end up paying $300-something of income taxes as soon as you get that extra dollar. We are buying down that number as well to make sure that the people at the lower end of the income taxes feel that. And on a going forward basis, if we're able to get this flat tax in place, inherently every tax cut we do in the future will involve every single person equally on a percentage basis.
Shane.
Back to Medicaid, I'm sorry if this went over my head, but on the expansion population, did you leave in the House language that would automatically repeal it if the federal government repeals?
Yes, we did. And again, it's not a comment on the merits of the program itself. It's a comment on the fact that we simply cannot afford to make up for that federal revenue loss. It's something that I've been pretty open about that, even when asked the question in gaggle. We just can't afford it. And so we have to do that for responsibility's sake. And actually, there has been a trigger. My understanding is there's been a trigger in place since Medicaid expansion was created. The trigger has been changed a little bit in the executive budget and I believe in the House budget as well. But nevertheless, it's an indication of we can't afford it if they were to drop below 90%.
There were a lot of witnesses who were
Pushing to change from may to shall, was there any discussion? Did you make that change?
Well, there were some discussions in the room, but I don't really want to get in too great a detail about some of that.
There's the establishment of a one-time $100 million set aside in state share construction regarding Senate Bill 1. Can you explain that?
Sure. Senate Bill 1, as you know, passed earlier this year. We wanted to make sure that everybody at the university level particularly was following through with the conditions and regulations in Senate Bill 1. We have the ability to decide how we're going to fund things. And so the intent behind this was to make sure that we are getting compliance with all aspects of Senate Bill 1. And the way it's being set up is that it would be an evaluation at the end of the first year of the biennium of all 14 of our universities as to whether they are compliant with Senate Bill 1 through some methods that we have outlined. If they are viewed as in compliance, they will get nothing will be withheld from their SSI share, which would be their normal proportion of the SSI dollars.
Final question to Jeremy Bowser.
Hi, Senator. Is there anything in this budget bill about tying Cuyahoga County sin tax to ensure that the Browns get their third of that sin tax money? And if so, does that tie it to the Brook Park site?
Good question. Thank you. So what we have in the bill, the Cuyahoga County permissive, allowing them to put it on the ballot. It's up to the voters in Cuyahoga County to decide if they want to do it or not. We had brought to us suggested legislation on that subject. There were some things in it that we didn't care for in terms of the extent of the increase and indexing taxes for the future. We don't like that idea at all. And we wanted to make sure that there was a proper sharing of the teams, regardless of where the teams are in Cuyahoga County. So that is in our bill. You can look at it when you look at the details. So we'll see where that goes.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay.
Gotta let 'em go.